Alrighty, so now it's time to take what you've done in attendance, and now we're going to work on the JavaScript part of this. Now, here's the good news I want to give you is that most, but not all, most of the work that you're about to see is work we've already done. And what you're going to basically be doing is recreating it. And the reason I do this is actually because when the more times you have to implement the code, the more times you have to touch it, the more likely you're going to learn it. Okay. So you see us now have touched the carbon footprint. We're in week 5, and you're going to touch it a little more after this. You have then recreated most of parts of that in your U code. You've had to code along. Of course, I stepped over that. But in this case, we're taking it and we're going to have you build it up from where we started to the place that it actually outputs an object. Okay, so I'm just going to show you mine and then I'm going to just walk you through the concepts. But the thing that I will say that you end up having to code here, and this will be like you'll see some verbiage I'll give to the way you approach this, is a decision app, because this in this case we're moving from where carbon footprint was just a not just, but it takes inputs and it calculates scores. It then totals that up to give you a total score. You are then taking inputs, right? So my inputs, I showed you mine before. Then what you're doing is you're making a decision. So what this means is, unlike the carbon footprint, you actually have to write some logic here. Okay. Now we're going to refine what you get started today, but this is a really good opportunity to see how well you can write logic. Okay. Now let's actually look at this because, I went over in the first one, but your goal is to build a project for this practice, to build a web app that helps you make personal decisions. And again, if you are doing something that's fairly generic, I'll probably say, hey, I would recommend doing something that's specific to you. Okay. So in this case, I have some instruction and then I have the score. So let's actually look at the instruction. So now what you're going to do is you're going to take the footprint is your guide to implement the following, right? Now it's important to do it in the steps, do the steps in the order of the instruction and the commits. Okay, now if you get all the way through and you still have some refining to do, and I noticed some of you did this in the U code, totally fine to add some additional commits, but I expect to see, and this is an important part of how I grade. So now, unlike what we did in attendance, you're actually going to create in this folder that we set up for in attendance an app.js. Okay, and then you're going to link it. And this is stuff we've done before. Now we've done it a couple times, so we're going to link it, right? And I even give you hints here, tests, right? This is why we do the sanity check to make sure, and that's why I put app loaded or something you want at the top, right? And then you're going to set up some global data. Right. So in this case, we're going to set up an array. Now, in this case, this is out of the order because we didn't set up the array, I believe, until last week. Okay. So, but you're setting it up here in the global data in your app.js to have for later, and it needs to be specific to whatever your app topic is. Okay. You can look at the syntax for how to do it in the carbon footprint, but the key is to name it, your own. Then you'll get your DOM references, right? So to your HTML form, we've done this. So again, naming is really helpful. Consistent naming. This is something I just finished reading from several of you in the week 3 U code is and the importance of that. And then so set up those DOM references in the app.js. So we're still in the app, right? Event handlers. Set up your handle form submission handle clear. Okay, for now, just put some console logs in there and set up your init. So we know that we will use that DOM, we're listening we're waiting for the DOM. So again, to be loaded before we then actually do the event listener for the form. So again, this is nothing new here. You've done all this. We're just doing it in these steps. Now, really important at this point is, make sure you test this, make sure it works. Okay. Because at this point, you should be at least able to see when you hit submit a console log message there and a clear button. Now, at this point, because of the amount of time that I believe it's going to have taken for you to have gotten to attendance into this, you can actually take a break here. Okay. Now, this is where if you have the energy, I definitely recommend continuing because at this point, the sooner you're going to hear me say this many times, the more ahead you can work, the better you can actually get help if you need it. Now, in this case, I'm actually offering a different kind of break because we have a code along, but not the AI and not the U code for this week because this is your U code. So you can take the break. You do have to tell me by submitting the URL, right, for this one, and then tell me, hey, I'm doing it. Make sure you push so I can at least see you got started. Right. So now I'm giving you until Thursday morning. Those of you who know I wake up pretty early. So make sure you get that submitted by Thursday morning, right? And preferably by Wednesday morning so that I could check it out and once you finish after your break. So now to continue on, if you're not taking a break, right? So your form handlers, now we're going to set up a form handler. Okay. Now in this case, I'm going to have you go ahead and name it form handler because that's what we've used. Talk about, setting up that file. You have to import it. You have to add the module to your HTML, right? So in this case, there is the name. Again, I'm giving you kind of a bit overview of what this code needs to do, but you have this demonstrated already several times, right? Testing code, since it's a module, make sure you export it. So make sure if your DOM references for the inputs are there, right? So make sure those are there. And so you're going to code get form inputs, right? So we know about helper function. In this case, if you're using radio buttons or checkboxes, however you do that, and then return an object literal, okay, from that. So then also code up the clear form. Again, you have great references here, right? So once you get that done, you're going to go back to your app.js, right? And then import it. Actually, I talked about this earlier, but here's where you do it. I actually gave you a step here, right? To add this to the top of your well, you can do it under your console log and then, right, update your handle form submit, right, to first do your prevent default and then call your get form inputs and store the result in a variable, again, specific to your app, okay? Console log that returned object, and then there's your commit. Now, at this point, here's where we're diverting from the calculator, but we can use the calculator, look at it, see how it actually created little helper functions along the way. But I want to tell you this, right? So this is probably the most important part. And it's not, it is the most important part of this one. So now instead of calculator, you have decision.js, right? So in the Carbon Footprint app, and this says, we dedicated to doing math. But for yours app, you need a similar brain, right? But instead of carbon determining it, you're going to evaluate your decision. Okay, so in here, create your new module, right? Your goal is to create and export the function that takes in the form data and returns an object. Okay, so we've done this work, right? I just got through reviewing week 3 U code, and this is what you did here, okay, was return the object. The key to this is how do you write the logic to actually walk through and do this. And this is where the pure function rule. So in this case, the reason I put this here is that there's no manipulating the DOM here. There's no update to the page. You're just sending that data back, right? So it's strictly taking in data and sending it back. Okay. So now you're going to have your, create and export your function, right? Define your inputs, right? This is because you're passing that from your form handler. And now you have to write some logic. Now, this is where do your best here. Now, I've given you kind of 3 ways to think about this, right? So, you must have at least one conditional if else. But the more work you do here, because you're going to see me talk about this in the next one because I want to see you refine it. And this is where you look at your README file and you may end up modifying that README file because you realize once you started to write the logic, it's like, oh, you know what? I actually want to change this. So in this case, you could use the math-based concept actually to do an if-else, right? So in some of this is how I kind of wrote mine in a way. I said if my score was above a certain number, and actually I ended up kind of doing it in this way. So I've kind of said you can use this score, right? The scorer, the math base is to calculate a score, and then based on your return value, right, you may do something like this. Now you have to think about using all these three inputs here, right? So this isn't the entire, how do you get to this place of that return object? This is not the part I'm giving you. This is the part I'm telling you this is what you need to do. So the other one is, right, you check specific inputs to determine a category maybe, right? So this might be example of a return object in that case. And the other one is a condition summarizer. You build a summary string, but use if else to modify it based on the conditions, okay? And again, you ensure that you return it. Now, here's also some helpful content is that at this point, you just want to have taken those three inputs at minimum that you had and return some type of decision. I've just given you some ways to think about it, some different patterns here, because remember, carbon footprint was only numeric based. You're actually going to make a decision, and only one decision comes back. So, like for me, my decision, and I'm going to come down here, right? And here's my one decision. My decision is to take a rest day, consider doing some yoga. Now, I ended up doing the results, but you don't have to, but you actually could if you wanted to. But in this case, if I submit it again, then I have two objects, two submissions, and I could change it to actually be maybe on Friday, right? I have, and it's warm. So then what do I do here? And so I could go look at that. I'm still doing yoga here, okay, on that one. It's because of my score here. Okay. Now I'm not going to show you my logic because this is where you really get help. Now, here's the reason I'm saying this is for this step one, it's acceptable to write all your logic in one main function, but over time, you want to do what we saw in the carbon footprint, which is to break it into smaller ones. If your function gets 15 to 20 lines, right, or if you're calculating two completely different things, right, consider breaking this. And this is what over time you want to learn how to do, like we did when we wrote determine household points. Okay, so do your best. Write some kind of logic. If you feel comfortable, definitely write some little helper functions that you can call to actually break down the pieces. Okay. And then, so actually, I'm going to actually show you something. So even though I'm not going to go through all my code, I will show you ultimately. Now, this is not where it has to end up for now. But in my case, I ended up doing a passing in my energy and then returning energy factor, right? So this is a variable that gets returned from it determining, how much of a factor was my energy and then how much of a factor was my day. Okay. And then this actually, and then the temperature. And then for this, I passed in each of those three, however I use to determine how much of an impact they would have and how it would be played out into this function, which is where I wrote the majority of the new logic, was to determine, right, what that was. My workout decision is what I wrote in here. So now, do you have to do all of this? No, but at least for now, you need to have figured out some way to write if else or switch statements that actually make some type of decision. And an output math number or just doing math is not a decision. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Okay, I just wanted to show you that because I thought, no, I don't want to show you all my code because I've done that before and students write almost what I show them. And the idea here is that you want to write this logic. So now you come back, you import this new function into your app.js, you update your handler, right, to then call your decision function and it's going to return that object. Now, in this case, I ended up pushing it into the array, right? And I think I didn't actually have you do that here. So we'll actually pick up, I was showing it where I had multiple objects in there. If you're comfortable, you can do that piece. Otherwise, we will pick that up on the next one. Okay, so then what you want to do here is give me your commit history. Again, you can see all the commits in here. You can see, did they align, right? Did you update the code to be specific for your decision? So I shouldn't see anything variable wise and otherwise related to the names that we use for the carbon footprint, but in this case, I will see, and I should see the same design patterns we saw, okay? Does it produce the output, right, either in the console or on the page? And the console is fine, so console log that return object, right? Right. So in this case, on step 2, we'll actually pick this up and have you do that step. So what you want to do here is submit your URL for the step 1 for your commit history, and I'll look at that. I'll pull your code in. Again, my suggestion here, I'm giving you a little more time until that, giving you that possible break. So take advantage of that. But if you can, get as much done so you can reach out for help. I hope this helps. I'll talk to you later.